All right. In this class, we are going to learn about positioning in CSS. Okay. This is very important concept when it comes to working with CSS. Without understanding this, it's going to be difficult for you to do to perform some magic, some tricks. Be able to learn grid, and all those things are good for layout. But sometimes you want to do something awesome, something different. Okay, and without you being able to understand this thing we are going to learn in this class today, which is positioning, it's going to be hard for you to do for you to achieve that. Okay, what is even positioning when you come to web development or CSS as a whole? Positioning is a way in which you can be able to place a particular item from one place to another. Okay, you have seen all this kind of thing in the web. You can be able to place a particular item. You want to move this thing from here to there, from here to there. But you can't be able to do that because you are actually confused on how you can be able to achieve that based on the knowledge that you have now. Okay, but after this class, with some example we are going to see, you should be able to do what? You should be able to work with positioning and also understand what is actually going to help us to do what? To achieve. And before I start that, I'm going to share my screen. Then we'll take a look at some things, okay, some samples from different websites, especially let me say LinkedIn. Okay, take a look at LinkedIn and see some things that are actually there. Even within this our Google Meet, there are a lot of positioning here. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, then we can now start. Okay, so share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my screen? All right. Okay, let me open up this. Let me just go to my LinkedIn account. I want to show us something before we continue. Okay. Okay. Now, the first thing we are going to take a look at now is this. Let me just scroll down my LinkedIn a little bit. Just take a look at this right side. So if I'm going down, all right, you can see I'm still going down, but this particular item here is just sticking there. It's not moving. It's just sticking there. It's not moving. All right. Those things are part of what positioning. You can't be able to do anything like this if you don't make use of position, or if you don't understand what the power of positioning. Now, if I'm scrolling down, see yet it's not moving. If I'm coming up again to a particular level, then it can still start coming down itself. All right. So that is one type of position that we are going to take a look at in this class. And one of them is what? An item or a container being able to do what? To stick at a particular position that you are going to do what? You are going to define for it. All right. Then another one is, let me just open my profile here. All right. Open up my profile here. You can take a look at one thing now. You guys are already good with CSS. Yes, based on this I've been seeing so far. You guys are already doing very great. But if I tell you to actually achieve some things here, it's going to be hard for you. You may be able to do what? To place this particular container in the center, because we learned about what? Flexbox, okay, in our last week class. But if I tell you to actually place this here, it may be hard for you, okay? This particular icon and this div here, it may be hard for you. The same thing to this particular image here. how can you even achieve this? Okay, because all these things, just like you telling computer, see, I want this image to be here. You just place it here because it's what is positioning. Just position this particular image here. You position this one here. All right, even this bell here, you position it here. Because all these things are what power of what positioning. And if you don't understand positioning when it comes to what web development, you will not be able to do what achieve all these things. It's not possible. Now, in this class, before we are done with this class, you should be able to do what? You should be able to design a profile page like this. Okay, just like LinkedIn. Okay, you should be able to do what to achieve that, making use of what positioning. Because everything here is basically what positioning. Okay, and all these things are things we are actually going to take a look at sequentially. But before we take a look at that, we are going to go to our escalate draw. Let's just draw some things and we now understand how these things actually works. And now take a look at the different type of positioning that we have when you come to what CSS. Then from there, we now go back to our code and start applying all these things, seeing their importance based on each and every one that we'll be making use of. Can you guys see me? All right. Okay, so I'm going to come to this escalate draw. Okay, now just move this away. Now, let's just look at one thing. Let's assume that this box, all right, is our browser. Okay, and you know our browser can be able to scroll up, scroll down, depending on the content. So if you have much content, so it should be able to do what to scroll. Okay, but if the content is not that much, it's not going to do what, it's not going to scroll. But one thing here is that when we are learning about inline elements and block elements, we are able to understand that all these elements that are block elements, they actually start from a new line. Okay, and most of the time they can occupy the whole width of what of the parents. Okay, of the parents, in the sense that at the first time the parents is the body as a whole. In our HTML, we have body, then we have head, then body are those white space here. Okay, the page, the web page itself. All right, then the head are those ones that we can't really see, apart from we giving it what a title. Okay, then inside this particular body, everything we are placing, okay, has a position by default. Has a position what by default. Even the block elements, the inline element, and thereabout, all of them has a position what by default. And this position is what we call what static position. Okay, it just what it's just static. There is no effect on it. Okay, it just what static position. That means if I have a div like this, okay, this is one div. Okay, then I have another div. Now the rule is that after this div, then another div is going to come under it. Okay, that is the rule. Another div will come under it. Okay, then after this one, another div will do what? We come under it. That is the rule. Okay, so you can't do what? You can't jump the protocol. Okay, it must be layered this way. And this is just what is positioning. And this is what static positioning. Okay, it's called what static position. That is the default type of position when you come to what? You come to CSS. Okay, so this one is something you have been making use of so far. Even when you make use of grid, flags, and thereabouts, you are making use of those things on what? On a static what? On a static parents. Okay, now you want to make use of grid in this first div that we have here, or the first parent that we have here. Good and fine. After your div and thereabouts, if you place another container below it, it's still going to come under it immediately, unless you now start making use of margin and thereabouts. So it's meant to come under it immediately, okay, without wasting time or without any gap of pieces. It's meant to come under it immediately, okay? And this is what static positioning when you come to what our CSS. That is the default what default position. Okay. Then once we move from this static position, then we have another one we call what relative positioning. Now, in this static positioning, there are some power that we have when it comes to positioning. And the power that we have when it comes to positioning is being able to tell your CSS that you want this particular div, instead of starting here, you want it to do what? To start like this, to move like this. Okay, to move away from the left side. Okay, or you can say you want it to move away from the top. All right, or you can say you want it to move away from what? From the right, or from the what? From the bottom. Okay, you can be able to do what? To do this once you are making use of some positioning apart from that default one. That default one, you'll not be able to make use of some properties in CSS to do what? To manipulate that particular what? That particular container that you want to manipulate. Okay, just like I said, you are made by default, everything is going to be what? Static. And those static don't have the freedom to do what? To make use of some properties in CSS, which can help us to position our div, our container, or any element in our HTML. Okay, and I'm saying that once we make use of the right positioning, we can be able to manipulate what? Manipulate our container or our element. By default now, I can say that we want to have a text here. You can say top, okay? You can say left, you can say right, you can say bottom. Okay, so this is our text. Okay, now looking at this particular div or element, which is the first one, which I said that all of them are what? Are static. That means you'll not be able to tell it, oh, move away from the right, from the left a little bit, or move away from the right a little bit, or move away from the top or from the bottom. All right, so we can be able to do what? To do this in this our static what? Format. And this is now when we move to the next one, which is what? Relative what? Relative positioning. What is relative positioning? This is going to mean two things. But for the first one, is we just saying that we want our CSS to give power to this our div, or this our container, or this particular what? HTML element. And the power that is going to be given to this particular element basically is for it to be able to do what? To move around relative towards to itself. Okay, so it's being able to move around in relationship towards to itself. Now I can now say, oh, I want this particular container to move 10 pixels away from what? From the left side where it is staying already. Okay, so it can now move 10 pixels away from the left. I can say, oh, I want it to move 10 pixels away from the top where it's already staying. That is where that name relative actually comes into play. Now we can now move 10 pixels away from where it actually was staying. I can still say, oh, I want it to move maybe 20 pixels away from what? From the right. So you can see what move 20 poses away from the right. Reason being that I've given it another what another positioning what property, which is what relative, and not that they are default what static what property. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, okay. All right, that's good. Okay. Now, once we're able to understand this, our static and relative, okay, then we'll now move to the next one. Now, the next one is absolute what positioning. This can be tricky. Yes, this can be tricky and confusing at the same time. But I'm going to do my best to explain this. And once we start showing some practical approach of it, okay, you guys are going to see what appreciate what we are learning here. Now, sometimes you want to make a particular what element to be what to be absolute in position. Now, this absolute in position is very simple for us to understand, even though it may be difficult for some people. Let me remove this. Let me remove this. Let me just leave it. Let me just leave it. Okay. Now, once you are making use of absolute position, let's just assume that for this our first div or container that we have here, which was relative or static, we now decide, oh, we want to change it from relative to what? To absolute in position. Okay. Once you change this particular div or container or any HTML element, you now made it to be what? To be absolute in positioning. Automatically, what is going to happen is that you are telling CSS that, CO, you want this thing to be absolute. That means it's not depending, okay, on our normal layout structure. Okay, that means any element that is under it can come what and take its space, but it's going to be what? It's going to be below it. So that means even though this my div or this container is still here, but by default, once we place another what? Another div or container, instead of starting immediately under it, because this one is position of what? Absolute. Automatically, this div is going to do what? Occupy the space where this one is meant to what? Occupy. Even though this one is still what? Is still there. The same thing happens if like we also made this one here to be absolute. So this one will go under here. Then this one also will still do what? We still go under here. That means we have what? We have three divs and they're just occupying what? The same space, because all of them are position of what? Of absolute. And now they are position of absolute and they are being positioned to the parents itself. At this particular instance, the parents here is just what? The screen, the whole page itself. Okay? The whole page itself. So they are just being positioned where they are meant to have what? Started. Can you guys hear me? Okay, let me just go over it again. Once you make use of position of what? Absolute. Okay, what you are telling CSS is that, CO, I want you to allow every other things to go in my position, but I'm still here. Let us see it that way. Let every other thing be in my position, but remember, I'm still here. Okay, so that is just the analogy there. So every other thing is going to go in your position, but you are still what? You are still there. So that means you are not really occupying the space, but you are actually what? Present there. Okay, that is why once you make this particular first container absolute, automatically it's still there. Okay, but CSS under the hood will notice that this is already at position of what? Absolute. That means any other element that is coming after it automatically can fill the space, even though this thing is still what is still there. It can fill the space. Same thing happens to this one. If the other one that is under here is still position of what absolute, this one also will still come under it and fill what and fill the space. Okay, so these are what position of what absolute when it comes to what when it comes to CSS. And once we start making use of our code, we are still going to understand these things the more. Okay, Chison.
Good evening now.
What again?
Please, I want to understand, is it that they will fill the space by default, or you are the one that is going to make them to fill the space?
Okay, they are going to fill the space by default. Okay, once you make this first div or first element, okay, position of absolute, then automatically every other ones here, they are meant to start immediately after this one by default now. If you're making use of static or relative positioning, by default, once after this comes this, But once you use this first one, just made it position of what absolute. You are telling CSS, just see this particular div as if it's here, but it's not really occupying the space. That means every other thing can just come what under it. So you can have this one here, then this one here by default. So once you just made the first one to be in position of what absolute, then others are going to occupy the space automatically. But once it's not in position of absolute, that means they are occupying their space. That means you can't really come and displace them because they are always there. So you can't occupy their space. You must come below them. Okay? But once you made that first one, position of what absolute, automatically, then every other ones can just go and occupy their space. That first one space. They can just go there and do what? Occupy the space without any problem, without any fight. You understand this? All right, okay. Any other questions so far? All right, okay. Then the next one is position of what? We have fixed position and we have sticky position. Okay, and you guys may have seen all these sticky and fixed position. The first one I showed you guys is a sticky position in my landing page. Okay, in my landing page here, so I just go to the home page. See login. All right, so if I'm just scrolling up, you can see that this particular element here at this right side, okay, automatically it's just sticking at a particular level. Okay, if I'm going up, it's not moving, it's just there. Okay, but if I'm coming down to some level, then it just start coming down. So this is what sticky, and this sticky is movement based on what? On the scroll. So you define the movement based on what? Based on the scroll. Now, by default or the initial time, this element here that used to what? Stick, once it's reached a particular level from this nav bar, automatically it just does what? It just stick. Because of how LinkedIn have actually done what? Designed their CSS. They told this element, or they told CSS that this element, if you are moving up to a particular level, if it's just, let me say, 100 pixels away from the top, I want it to do what? I want it to stick. Then automatically, it's just going to what? Stick. Once it's just 100 pixels away from what? From the top. Okay? Then if you're now scrolling down, then it will still scroll down. Then once you are going up, and it just read that 100 pesos, automatically it's just going to do what? It's just going to stick there. And that is position of what? Sticky. All right. You guys may have used those position of sticky in your what? In your navbar. Yes, in the navbar, based on the things you guys have been setting in the group, maybe make your position of sticky or what? Or fixed in the navbar. And all those things are things we are actually going to do what? We are going to look at. Okay. So is there any question based on all this relationship positioning and how I was able to illustrate them before we move into the code? All right, okay. So there is no question. All right, so let's move into the code. All right, so we have our VS Code open now. Okay, we just collapse this. Okay, but before I start, what I'm going to do is just for me to do what? For me to create a div. All right, now see my plan here. I want to just make use of what we just did here, or what I just used to illustrate what we had here, okay, to explain all these things. Okay, so I'm going to have three divs. Okay, three divs, give them border, so you can be able to see how they are actually what relating to what to themselves. Okay, you're going to have what three divs with a width and a height. Okay, they will now give them different background color, so that I can be able to demarcate that this is what div 1, div 2, and div 3. Okay, and I bet that these are things that you guys can easily do. If I'm to even throw it a challenge, okay, just create three divs with a width and a height and thereabout. It's something that you guys can be able to achieve. Okay, so I'm still going to bore you guys more by creating those three divs, and we're looking at how they are being what they are respecting their space sequentially, and how we can be able to make use of positioning to shake some things out of the way. All right, so let me just minimize this. Okay, so I have a div, that is the first div, then another div here, second div, and third div. Okay, so I have these three divs. Let me just zoom in. So I have these three divs. Then I'm going to give it a class. Okay, class of, and let's say div 1. Okay, class, and let's say div 2. Class, I can just say div 3. All right, so we have these divs. Okay, so I'm going to minimize this, then run this in my browser. I can open my browser also. Okay. All right. Okay, so I have my browser here. Then I'm just quickly going to create my CSS file. So I'm going to link. So relationship is going to be what style sheet. Then href is going to be index.css. All right, so I'm just going to create a file for my index.css here. Okay, index.css. All right. Then the first thing I'm going to do is, you always have some invisible words, padding and thereabouts when it comes to our CSS. So if I put like a paragraph here and just say heading and save. So you can see there is actually some space here. Okay, and there is some space also here. Okay, so I have to do what? I have to remove them first. So I can just come to my index or CSS, then make use of universal selector, window selector. Okay, I'm now saying any padding that is there. So I want it to be what? I want it to be 0 pixel. Then any margin, I want it to be what? 0 pixels. Then um then box sizing should be what? Border box that I saved. So you can now see that everything, all those padding, they're actually gone. All right. So now we can be able to do what? To continue with what we have. So I can just remove this heading I actually gave it here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to just create a CSS for this my div1. Okay. Let's just take it sequentially. Dot div1. Okay, I'm going to give it a height. Okay, a height of, let me just call it 300 pixels. Okay, give it a background color of red. Okay, and save. Now, I don't need to give it width. Okay, but even if you give it width, there is no problem. If you can give it 100%, there is no problem. Okay, but by default, it's going to stretch through the whole width of what? Of the parents, because div itself is what? A block element. Okay, that is why we are learning all these things sequentially. We have to learn about block elements and inline elements. Then now we're learning about positioning. Okay, block elements can stretch through the width of what? Of their parents, because they are what? They are block elements. And div is a block element. Section is a block element. Paragraph is a block element also. But some things like input, they are not block elements. Span, bold, and thereabouts. All those things are what? Are inline elements. So they can only just occupy this space based on their what? Their size. Even though you can make use of CSS to influence them, but still yet by default, they can just do what? Occupy the space based on their own size. Okay. Now we have this first div, which is what? This. Okay, and this is a position of what? Static position, and that is the default position. I can now go ahead and say, oh, I want to also work on my second div, which is what? Div 2. Okay, I can say dot div 2. I can give it a height of what? 300 pixels. The background color of, I want to give it blue. Okay, and save. Good. You can see what happened here. And that is the same thing I was actually trying to illustrate in that escalate drop. Okay. Now, this is the first div. Just immediately after the first div, we have what? We have another div. Just immediately after it, you have another what? Another div. It's not giving it any space at all. You have another what? Another div. And that is the natural way the web actually works. So once you are done with the first section or the next element, another element just come under it. Okay, because now you can't go below this red one because this red one is occupying this space. There is no space for it to just go under it or above it. You must do what? Come below it. Okay, that is what? The next div. Then if I now come and say, okay, let's just put the last one, dot div 3. Still give it a height of what? 300 pixels, and give it a background of what? That say yellow. Then I can save. Good. Now I can be able to do what? To scroll this because the size is now bigger than the normal size of the screen. So you can now be able to start scrolling. All these things are in position of what? Static positioning. How do we even give positioning to our CSS? How do we even declare it? We have been saying positioning, 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 without even declaring it. And I told you guys that we have a default what? A default position. And that default position is what? Is a static what? Position. How do we create a position? Now, for this our first div, let's use this as a point of reference. Let me come here and say, oh, I want to create a position. So I can just pass position. Okay. Now, once I click on position, you can see we have absolute, we have fixed, we have relative, we have static, and we have what? We have sticky. Now, these are the 5 type of position that we have. Okay. And you're not going to bother yourself much about this what? About this static, because that is the default. You don't need to say, oh, I want to make use of static position to do something, because by default, yeah, you make use of static position. Okay, by default is static. So if I choose static, there is no difference. Everything is what? The same. There's no difference at all. Okay. The same thing to this div 2, they are all what? They are all static what? In position. Okay. And when I was talking about these divs in their positioning, I mentioned 4 most important things when you come to positioning. When you're able to talk about relative positioning or absolute positioning, that means you can be able to control the movement of a particular div or element in your what? In your HTML, which I gave an example of it in this escalator, that you can be able to move this div based on top, left, right, and bottom. Okay, you can be able to do what? Move these things around. Okay, based on if you want to move away from the left, move away. If you want to move away from the top, move away from the top. The same thing, all right, from the bottom, then from the right, the same thing. Okay, but once you are making use of static position, you will not be able to have that power by default, because by default, static position doesn't have the power to move these things around based on this power that we have here: top, left, right, bottom. Okay, so once I'm making of static, you won't be able to do that. So that means if I go back here, okay, making use of my CSS property, which is what? Top of, let me say, 20 pesos. If I save, so you can everything see the same way it is. It's not moving. It's not moving away from the top, not giving space from the top. Okay. The same thing if I say, oh, I want left. I want left to move away from the left a little bit of 20 pesos. It's not working also. Reason being that once you are making use of this position of static, it doesn't have that power to achieve that. But other positioning has that power to start making use of top, start moving around your what, your container or your element. So once you don't make use of position of static, you should be able to do what? Start moving your container or your what, your element, HTML element. Can you guys see me? Hello, can you guys see me, please? All right, okay, that's good. Okay. So if I come here now and decide to change this position from static to relative, okay, which I'm going to do now, from static towards relative. If I save this now, so see what happened immediately. I just saved it. Then I was able to move 20 pixels, all right, from the top. So you can see it, we have something white here. 20 pieces from what? From the top. Then also 20 pieces from what? From the left. There's something remarkable actually happened here. Even though we moved 20 pieces from the top or from the left, but still yet the browser still remember that this guy actually had this space before. I'm still going to reserve the space for him All right, even though you want to move around, I'm still going to reserve this space for him. So once you're making use of position of relative, you can still be able to move around, but still yet, believe you me, this space is still left for you. So that means this other element here, okay, cannot really come under it or try to occupy the space that is actually here. Even if I start to increase this top from 20 to, let me say, 80. So see what happened here. It's still moving down, but these ones can't go up and say, oh, I want us to occupy this space because this one is now coming down. So by default, the browser see what keeps this particular space for this particular word div because it's making use of position of what native. Now, the difference between this native and that last one, which is the default one, which is starting positioning, is that we can now start moving these things around, the div around. But the position or the space, the initial space is still kept and is not being occupied by another element. Okay, so once you just make use of position of relative, that means you can start doing what? Making use of that power of top, left, bottom, or right to do what? To position your element the way you want it to be. And that is the reason why it's called what? Positioning in CSS. So you can be able to move it around from the left, move it 20 pixels from the left, from the top, move it 100 pixels from the top, and all those things. And you can't be able to achieve this thing I'm talking about if you don't make use of what? Positioning. Okay? Moving the element in self. Okay, moving the element in self, you must make use of what? Position for it to be able to achieve this automatically. You may say, but you can be able to make use of padding to do that. But if you make use of padding, you're also going to what? Affect this one here and this one here. If you use padding of, let me say, 10, 20 pixels in the body, okay, so this one also will be affected, and the third one also will also be affected. But in this instance, you just want to move only this one, okay, and that is why we made use of position of relative to still make sure that this space, all right, is still reserved for this particular what, this particular div or this particular container or element, and still being able to have the power to move it to move it around. Okay, so is there any question concerning this position of relative that you just used now? Any question at all? All right. Okay, now we have used position of what? Position of relative, and this relative basically is relative to what? To inself. Okay, relative to what? To inself, because it was here before, it was just 0, 0. Okay, and if I remove this, just goes back to how it was. Okay, but once I just say top of 10 pesos, then it's going to move 10 pesos based on where it was before. So it's moving relatively to what was inself. Okay, it's moving 10 pesos away from where it was. I'm not saying it's moving 10 pieces away from, let me say, the body or from another element in the what? In the window. Okay, so it's just moving 10 pieces from where it was. So it's moving in relative to what? To itself, not to another element at all. Okay, so if I save it, it just moved 10 pieces now from where it was before. Okay, and that is what position of what? Of relative. Okay, then the next thing we'll talk about now is what? Absolute positioning. And we are going to play around with this particular one because it's going to be what? Very, very important for us. Okay, we play around with it and we now see some rules on how to actually control this particular what? Positioning. Okay. Now let's give this particular item position of what? Absolute. Absolute that I save. Do you see what happened now? What happened now is what I was actually explaining before. Okay, if I come here, let me just zoom this up. What I was explaining before is that this particular element we are seeing here, or this particular div we are seeing here, once you give it a position of what absolute, even though you are not even applied all this power of top, left, right, and bottom, but by just giving it a position of what absolute, automatically this one can come here and this one will just be here. Okay. Now, the difference between this and position of relative, that when you are making use of relative still occupy its space, even though it's moving around, but it's still going to do what? Occupy its space. So nobody is going to do what? Cover that particular space. It's still going to occupy its space. No one can actually what? Take that space from him. But once you switch it from relative to absolute, automatically you're not telling the HTML or CSS that we are okay where we are, but every other person can come and occupy our space, but we are still there. Yes, we are still there. Because that is what actually happened here. Immediately we turn this to position of what? Of absolute, then we can see our red box automatically. But believe me, that box is under what? Under this blue box you are seeing here. It's still there. Under this blue box you are seeing here. Then even if I say, oh, I want to also make this our blue box to be position of what? Absolute. I can come here and still give it a position of what? Absolute. Then I say, see what happened here. So we now look at this, we now say, you just have only what? Only one div here. The reason why I see it that way is because all of them have what? The same height and the same width. So they are overlapping what? Each other. But for us to see that these things are actually there, okay? They are actually there. Is if you give them different height now, you can now see that this one is under this one, while the other one is under the first one. Okay, so this is the first div. Let's give it a height of 500 pesos. Okay, so I can save this. Okay, so I refresh this. Okay, good. Then give this one a height of, let me say, 400 pesos. Okay, then this one is height of what? 300 pesos. Let me just give 400 pesos. Okay, 300 watts, 300 pesos. All right. Now, all these things are happening this way because this basically is covering everything. And that is what is going to take us to Z index. I don't want to move into it now yet, but it's going to be what's confusing. Okay, you should be able to have a preference. You want this one to be showing first, the other one should be showing less and thereabout. Okay, that is going to talk about what Z index. Okay, but for the meantime, let me not go into Z index now. Let's just stick on what our positioning for the meantime. Then once we reach to a particular level or to a particular extent, we'll now move into what? Into those things. Okay, let's just take it back to those 300. Okay. Okay. Now all these things, the red one, okay, is under what? The blue one, while the blue one is under what? This yellow one. And they are arranged that particular way in our what? In our DOM. Okay, and that is what? Positioning. Absolute what? Positioning. So once I'm making use of absolute positioning, automatically you are telling HTML and CSS that CO, this particular element, okay, that is going to be absolute. That means every other thing can go under it or on top of it based on our Z index, which I'm going to learn very soon. Okay, but by default, every other thing that is below it, it's going to be on top of it by default. It's going to be what on top of it because all these things are what position of what absolute. So once you're able to understand, once you're making use of relative positioning, you are still occupying your space, even though you want to flex around, still want to move around. Okay, that is one thing there. And once you're making use of absolute positioning, you want to flex around, but you don't want to keep the space. Okay, don't want to keep what the space. You just want it to be that way. You can let this to not let me say normal relationship. Okay, you may see a boy that's let me say womanizer. He still loves a particular woman. So you never joke with that woman. Okay, even though he's sleeping around with other women, but a particular woman, he doesn't want any person to come close to her. All right, don't want any other person to come close to her. So that means this person is actually making use of relative positioning. So he's moving around, doing everything he wants, but no one should come to this particular lady. It's mine and mine forever. Okay, so that guy is a relative of positioner. But someone that is absolute positioner, this person, he doesn't care. He doesn't have any person that he can say, this is my own or thereabout. He can move around, he can come and take his space. He can even come and live in his house and do anything he wants. Okay, he doesn't care. But he's still there. He's still there, still trying to do one thing or the other. All right, so that is the just relationship here. So once you're making use of position of relative, automatically you still have control over your what, over your space. But absolute, things are going to what, overshadow you, even though you are still there. Okay, is there any question? All right, okay. There's no question. Now, let's just work on this absolute and relative that's just established now and see how far we go with this. Okay, and then we can now talk about sticky and fixed, okay, which you guys have actually started making use of already. Okay, how do we really make use of this particular what, these particular things? Now, what I'm going to do basically is going to be very much simple. We are going to just play around, then see some of the things that are going to be surprised on, okay, and some things that you'll be confused on. You are going to be confused initially, but over the time, if you have been understanding everything I've been saying since, it's still going to be easier for you to do what, to get everything. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove everything you have here. Okay. Then in our container here, okay. Now we have our body. So this is our body. And this is our body. I'm going to have what? I'm going to have a div. Okay. And this div is just going to be a square. Okay. It's just going to be what? It's just going to be a square. What I want to establish is this. Let me just make use of a scaling draw to explain this. Let me move this a little bit. Okay, now this is our window. This is the browser itself. Okay, now I'm going to make use of flexbox, okay, to position this particular div here. Okay, now this div is going to be a container to what? To a box, which is going to be what? Moving around. This box, we can move it here. Okay, making use of our absolute positioning. We can decide to move it here, move it here, move it here. Just move it around, okay? So that I can be able to see the power of what is our positioning, okay? And who can tell me, based on things you guys have been learning, how we should be able to just place this particular div in the center, okay? So we are not talking about this one. How can we just place this particular div in the center of the page? Is there anyone that wants to try? Can go on, please.
Okay. To center the div, you would have to make the Yeah, you have to put the margin and the margin left with yeah, you'd have to put the display on block. Then the margin you have to put it on 0 and not 2. I don't know if that works.
Okay, okay, you tried. You try. Let's hear from another person. Is there any person I want to try? We can go on. You can go on. Maybe you're muted.
Okay, I think align center can do it.
Okay, align center. It
Uh,
just me just say using align center. We just do it.
I think
Okay, what am I aligning at the center? From where
this
am I?
particular one,
Which one?
the one outside.
The one outside. Okay. Okay, you tried. You tried. Is there any other way we can? Any other thing you have to do for us to align at the center?
Yes, sir, I want to say something.
Okay, you can go on, please.
Yes, so you just use display, flex, and then align center.
Okay. All right. You can see how we are making use of group or teamwork to actually achieve this particular question. Okay, the first person tried, second person also tried, the third person still modified what the second person just said, but it's just remaining one more thing for us to achieve everything. All right, okay, you guys have tried so much. Now, in your last class, you learned about Flexbox, your last class. And in that last class, you learned about Flexbox, it's very, very important. There are some things you saw with Flex. There are some things you solve with grid. Okay? And these things are ways of solving problem. But this problem I want to solve now, the best way to solve it is by making use of what? Making use of Flexbox. Now, this is the what? The container or the parents. Now, this is the child. What you just wanted to do is to place this child at the center of what? The parents. Okay? Now, when you want to place something at the center of the parents, you are meant to be thinking about two things. First thing is horizontal position of that particular item. So I have to draw this line. Okay, let me draw this line. Then draw another what? Another line. Okay, let me just move this a little bit. Okay, one thing you guys need to understand is that everything you are doing with CSS or computer, they're always what? Precise. They take pieces into what? Cognizance. That is very, very important. Okay, and that is why if you're able to do something right, it's going to work right. If you do something wrong, it's going to be what? It's going to be wrong. Now, this is the thing we want to actually what? We want to place at the center. But place it at the center, you don't just throw it anyhow. We take the horizontal version of the parents and what? The vertical what? Part of the parents. This is now what? The center of the parents. That is the center. So anything we are placing here, whether I think is very big or is very small, it must be within what? Everything must be within the center of what? Of the parents. Okay? Now, the first thing we have to do, we are going to make use of the easiest way to achieve this. We are going to make the parents to be what? A flex box. So once you make the parents a flex box, we are making use of the display of what? Flex. Okay? Then from there, we can now tell the parents, oh, we want it to be a line item at the center. When you make use of align item center, this is what it means. It means I want this item to be what? At the vertical what? Center. At the what? At the vertical center. So once you make use of align item center, it's going to be what? At the vertical center of what? The parent. So this particular element we have here is at the center vertically. So see the parents here is from here to here. All right, that is the height. Then this particular item is what? Is at the center vertically. All right. If I say, oh, I want it to be justify content center, so that means I want it to be here. So it's going to be what? At the center at what? The horizontal what? Axis or the x-axis. All right. So you guys mentioned that it's going to be a display of flex, and it's going to be a line item of what? Center. So it's going to be this way. But when you now say justify content of what? Center, that means you can now place it at the center this way. Because now you're now considering both the x-axis and what? And the y-axis at the same time. But if you just consider only the x-axis or only the y-axis, you won't be able to place that particular item at the center of the parents. It won't be what? It won't be possible. Can you guys hear me? Okay, is this making sense? Do you guys understand this better now? All right. Okay. Now we are now going to use our code to actually illustrate this. Then move these things around. Then you can now see what we are able to do, what we are able to achieve with this. Okay. Okay. Now this is the body. Okay, this is the body. Then this is that particular div that we want to place at the center. Then before that, I'm just going to give it a name. Call it a name. Class can just say child. Let me just call it parents. So let me just call it child for the meantime. Child. Now this body we assume is what? The parents. Okay. Now, what I just need to do first is to have a class which I'm going to call what? Called child. Then I'm going to give it a width. So it's going to be a width of what? Let me give it 400 what? Pesos. Then I'm going to give it a height of 400 what? Pesos also. Okay. Now you may be wondering, why are we repeating ourselves with 400 pesos, height 400 pesos? So we still have another CSS property called what? Aspect what? Ratio. So instead of me repeating myself with 400 pesos, height 400 pesos, since this is something that can make use of aspect ratio by dividing and thereabout, I can just say aspect ratio of what? Of 1. So that means this aspect ratio means width all over what? Height. Width divided by height. So I'm not telling CSS that I want the width divided by height to be 1. That means 400 divided by 400 is equal to 1. Okay? So automatically, CSS will understand that what I'm talking about now, I want my width and my height to be equal. So if like I say aspect ratio of 2, that means basically what I want is width is going to be what? It's going to be very much bigger than what? The height. Maybe the width is going to be 400 and the height is going to be what? 200 pieces. Okay, that is the formula about what? Aspect ratio. Okay, so instead of me repeating myself, I can just say aspect ratio of what? Of 1. Okay, then I can just move ahead and say border. Just give it a border 1 pesos solid black. All right, so I can save this. Okay, so you guys can see what we have here. But let me even reduce the width and the height for the meantime. Let me say 200. Okay, so this is what we have here. So you have this box here. Okay, let me give it 5 pesos solid. All right, so this is what we have here. And now our plan is to place this box at the center. Yeah, man, this is not yet position. This is normal flex box that you guys are meant to have learned in your last week, and it was taught. Okay. I know that it's going to take some time for those guys to start implementing this and understanding it. So once you keep on practicing, this becomes your second nature. It becomes easier for you. Okay. This is not difficult. So we have what our child is just placed here. Then our body. Now our body is this. So I want to make use of display of what flex. Okay. So I can say align item of what center. Now see what's happened here. It's not moving, right? It's not moving. But if I say justify content of center, let's check. Now it's moved. It's moved. Then I ask yourself, why did that first one, why didn't it move? Why didn't it not move? But the second one was able to move because justify content of center is to place this particular item, okay, at the center of the what of the x-axis or of the horizontal what axis, okay. But when we try to place it at the center, okay, for the vertical axis, it will not work. Reason being that we do not give it a height, all right, because now body, div, section, and thereabouts, all those things always occupy the whole width, unless you now explicitly declare that you want it to be a width of what 200 pieces, which is just something we did here. Okay, we now give it 200 pieces, but by default is meant to be what the width of what the parents. And this our body is not what an exception. So this body is taking the whole width here, all right, but you not give it what a height to work with, and that is why CSS will never complain. If it's a JavaScript, you want to do something, you're not doing it right, it's a complaint showing red everywhere, and thereabout. But CSS will just be looking at you. You don't know what you are doing. When you are done being rubbish, you relax and start looking at the right thing to what to do. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this. Then before we talk about placing that our div, this particular child, at the vertical center, we must give it a height. So I can just say height of 100 view height. Okay. All right. Okay. So display of flex. Okay. Align item to be at the center. Okay. Now you can see it now. This item now is at the center in what the vertical axis. In the vertical axis. And this is where you guys' strength actually reached based on the last lady that actually answered the question. Okay. Display of flex, give it a height. So without any height, it's not going to work. Give it a height, all right. Then you make use of align item at the center. Then the next thing is justify content what center. So once you make use of justify content center, then we'll be able to do what to place this particular element at the center. Do you guys get it now? All right, okay. So is there any question based on what we are able to achieve now, placing this particular box at the center? Okay, that's good. Make sure you guys practice on this, okay? Try to place the box in the center. So once you're able to play around with this very, very well, it becomes easier for you. Okay, once you're looking at the particular site, you should be able to digest it. Okay, it should not be hard for you to do it, for you to clone. And very soon, maybe in our second month of this our learning, you start what cloning websites. Because by then, we should have imparted a lot on you guys to be able to do what to do all those things. Okay, now we have this at the center. Good and fine. Then, but still bear in mind that this, even though it's at the center, the position is still what static. The position is what is static. Okay, it's static positioning. But I want to do something. I want to have another div inside this one. So inside this particular child, okay? So I want to have another div inside it. Okay? So I'm going to have a div, okay, which I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to call it inner child. Okay. This div of inner child, I will use it to perform some things or try to explain some things to us. Okay, so I can copy this. Dot inner child. All right. I'm going to give it a width. Okay, a width of let me say 50 pixels. Give it a height of, let me just put 50 pixels. So I should have used aspect ratio 50 pixels. Okay, border radius, okay, 50%. Okay, then give it a background color of red. All right, so I can save this. So we have what? We have a circle here. And by normal way, because it's under what? Under this particular what? This particular parents. Okay, that is why it's located at the edge. Okay, at the left what? Top left edge. By default, that is where it's meant to be. Okay, now these are our parents. This our child that is housing this inner child basically is a container, and its position at this particular time is what is static positioning. Okay, now I can decide to give this child an absolute position because I want to start moving it around. Because if I try to say top 30 pixels, okay, it's not working. It's not working because this child also is still making the position of was static and not what relative or absolute. Okay, but you want to learn more of absolute because that is what you'll be using to do some what to perform most of all this magic. Right? Now, I'm going to give it a position, which I can say position of what? Absolute. Then I save. Okay? Good and fine. Our ball is still here. So that means we are doing well. Then the next thing, I'm going to give it a top of 20 pesos. Then I save. You see what happened here? This ball actually moved from here and is now here. Is now here. So this is where it becomes tricky when we talk about the positioning. Okay? It moved from this parents that is meant to follow and is now following what? Following the body, like the body itself. So that means we have to do something about it. Even if you say left of, let me say left of 20 pesos. So you're just moving, you're just following this main body itself. Instead of following or respecting what the direct parents to it. It's not following the grandparents. Because now it was under this our triangle. Then from there, it moved away from this our triangle. Once you gave it a position of what absolute, it moves away and is now following or respecting what? Respecting this our grandparents. How can we be able to control this? And that is when positioning just become much more interesting. Now, this our our triangle, which is meant to be holding this our red circle. We also meant to give it a position so that our red circle can be able to understand and respect what? And respect this our triangle. And which position can we be able to give it? Any position that you're able to give this one, all right, as far as not the default position, which was static. So that means you are going to give it a position of what? Relative. Most of the time, you end up giving it a position of what? Relative. So once you give it a position of relative, then under the hood, automatically, CSS is going to make sure that this particular red circle does not actually leave this our div or this our container. It's going to be moving around based on this our what? Our container, and not this the grandparents. So if I come here now to this child and give it a position of what? Relative. This our child basically is this our what? Our square that we have here. If I give it a position of relative and save, automatically this red line will just come back and start respecting what? The parents. It can never leave the parents. Anything it's doing, it's going to be doing it what? Based on the parents' what? Part. It cannot move away from what? From the parents. It's going to just be just moving around within what? Within the parents. So even if you come here and change this, top should be 0 and left should be 0 pieces. So that means it's just going to be in this normal position that it started from. If I say top of 0 and right of 0 and save, so you can see the top is still 0 and the right is what? 0. So it's moving towards the top, trying to make sure that it touches the 0 part of the top, and also towards the right, trying to make sure that it touches the right part, that is the border, all right, not giving it any space at all. You can still say, okay, bottom of 0 and right of what? Of 0. Okay. Bottom of 0. Now you can see the right is 0 and the bottom is what? Is 0. Okay. The same thing happens to our left. I just say left of 0. Left of 0. Now you can see. So you have left of 0. I mean, you're able to move these things around. Okay, we're able to move it around, also do what? To perform this our absolute positioning and our relative what? Positioning. So you can see that once you want to make use of absolute positioning, make sure that the parents that you want to move it in relative to should have a position of what? Relative. Very, very important. So don't forget this, because you are likely going to forget it. All right. But once you want to design something, let me assume I told you to perform something simple this way. Okay, just like all this carousel that you used to see online. Okay, so I have a div this way. Okay, you have something like this. You have another thing, circle like this. Okay, you have another circle like this at this side. Okay, at the center this way. All right, so we have, okay, let me just use pencil. So you have back, you have this. All right. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay. Now we have something, you have something like this. Okay. We are told to design something, just something like this. There should be a button, so to click, and the person can be able to visit the last thing. This one, you can move to the next thing. So in your mind now, you yourself, you know that this actually, for you to achieve this, the only way you can be able to achieve this is by making use of what? Positioning. That is the only way you can be able to do what? To achieve this. Okay? Making use of what? Positioning. And some other things I've not taught yet, which I'm going to what? Explain. I'm making use of what? Positioning for you to do what? Achieve this. But now, this particular circle that you want to place in this center here and in this center here, both of them are trying to achieve one thing. This one, you want to place it in the center of the what? Of this particular axis. Okay, this is the y-axis. So you want it to be the center of what? The parent in terms of what? The y-axis. The same thing to this particular one. But now the difference that this one is at the left side of the edge, while this one is at the right side of what? Of the edge. Okay? And this is things we are able to do what? We are able to achieve a little bit by making use of what we have here. We are playing around here, our circle. Okay, but now our circle, we're just trying to move it from here to here to here to here. But we're not able to put it at the center. Okay? Not like trying to put it at the center here, which is something you have already achieved. Okay? Or we are able to do. Okay? But this one, we want to put it at this particular what? Center here. And bear in mind, this is actually what is actually going to be an absolute positioning. Because we want to move this thing around freely, very, very well. Okay? So that is why I'm going to make this thing to be what? Absolute what? Positioning. But we want to do what? We want to achieve something like this. We have a circle here. We have what? We have a circle here. Just like a carousel. Okay, where you can come, you click on a particular what, a particular one, and it just sweep. You click on another one, just sweep. The same thing, you click on this one, it just sweep, and thereabout. Okay, to the previous what, previous post or previous picture. Okay, how can we still be able to do this with what, with our positioning? Okay, so once you see something like this, then you know that this actually is a direct parent. So that means this particular direct parents must be in position of what? Relative. Because now all this circle is going to be what? Absolute position. Because if you don't make these parents to be what? In position of what? Relative. Automatically, once you decide to say top of 0 or top of 10 pieces or thereabout, this one, okay, this one will just jump. Okay, so this one will just jump to maybe something or somewhere like this. Okay, just jump somewhere what like this because of what it not make this parents to be what a relative. So just going to jump to what, to the highest level, jump away from the parents, any other thing to what, to the body itself. I just stay there. Okay, so you must remember to always make what the parents to be what relative, so that the children can be able to do what, move around within that particular what area, and that is how you'll be able to what, achieve all this design. Because if you don't understand this particular positioning very, very well, it's going to be very hard for you to be able to perform magic or design a complex what website. But the funny thing there is that all these things come with what? Practice. Okay, once you are done with this class, you just try to practice things that was taught. Okay, just follow the class sequentially. Watch it on YouTube, follow it sequentially. Okay, and make sure that you complete it. Okay, because there will still be an assignment, and the assignment we are giving to you is just for you to be what, on your toes and keep on doing what, keep on doing, performing the task you are actually supposed to what, to perform. Okay, can you guys hear me? All right, okay. That means, is there any question so far before we try to create this kind of carousel? Okay, there's no question. All right, okay. Let me just take you guys to this and let's try to create this particular thing now. Okay. Now I can just increase the size of this our child. Okay. Let's just increase the size from 200 pesos. Let's just make it 400 pesos. Okay. Then make this aspect ratio of what 2. Okay. So 2 is best. And just make it 1.5. Okay. So this is 400. Aspect ratio of 1.5. Okay, I think this is okay. Now, what you want to do, we want to place this first ball here. Then also going to have another ball which are going to place at what? At the right. Okay, so let's just go to our div. So this is the first child. So you can just call this one left ball or prev. Let's call it prev, which is previous. Okay, prev. Then the next one is going to be a div. So we are going to give it a class of what? Of next. Okay, so I can save this. All right, so now go ahead. Okay, so let me just remove this and start afresh. Okay, repetition is always the key. Okay, so I just put dots prev. I want to start designing for what? For the prev. Okay, even though I'm going to repeat myself even in the next, but all these things are just what repetition is going to be good for you to learn. Okay. So you're going to have a width of what? You can call it 60 what pesos. And I'm going to have a height of what? 60 pesos also. Okay. Then I'm going to have a background color of what? Red that I can save. All right. So you want it to be a circle. So you give it what? A border radius. 50 what? 50%. Okay, so you have it here. Now, the problem is that I want it to be at the center. Okay, I want it to be at the center. But some things that most of us will start doing is that we start playing around with values. Can I say top? Okay, let me give it position of absolute first. Position of absolute. Okay, then I say top. Okay, top should be, I can say 100 pesos. So you cannot look at it and say, I think it's in the center. It's in the center, okay. Maybe it's not in the center. Then you cannot say 90 pesos. Oh, now it's in the center. But this is not in the center. If you take a look at the pieces very well, it's not in the center, but in your eye, it looks like it's in the center. And this is what we call static design. And it's not going to scale very well, especially when you start learning about mobile and all those things. Because now in this laptop, it seems like it's in the center, but it's not in the center because you're not flowing the right way for you to do what, to achieve this. Okay, there should be a way in which you can be able to make use of CSS, some tricks you can use to do what, to achieve this particular objective. All right. Now you have given it a position of what? Absolute. Okay, and since it's absolute, it's going to be absolute in relative to what? To the parents. Okay, relative to what? To the parents. So everything you are doing it in relation to the parents. So if you say 50 pesos, you are moving 50 pesos away from what? From the top of what? The parents. Okay, now what we used to do for us to place an item, okay, at this vertical center, especially when you are making use of position of what? Absolute, is for it to do what? To make use of 50 what? 50%. Make use of percentage. Now I want to move this circle 50%, okay, in the height of what? The parents. Okay, We want to move it 50% in the height of what? The parents. So I can just say 50 what? Percent. That I say. Now, good and fine. This is still 50%. But even though looking at it, it seems like it's not what at the center. Yes, it's not at the center. But when we move 50%, we are moving in respect from here to this top here. So if you trace it this way, it's at the center. Okay, but we being human being, okay, we are seeing the ball, we are expecting this ball to come up here, okay, and be in center perfectly. Okay, to be in the center what? Perfectly. How are we now going to do what? Achieve this? Remember that I actually showed you guys when you are making use of flex box and thereabouts for you to be able to make use of align item center. But now this one is quite different. This one is we making use of what? The child itself. We are using the child to move around. I'm not using the brains to arrange things. But sometimes you want to just what? Move only one particular item and not to move everything what within the parents. Okay? You just want to move only one particular what item, which is what? This particular box. And I'm moving it around because give it a position of what? Absolute. Now, from here to here is what? 50% of the height of what? The parents. 50% of the height of what? The parents. But now, this still yet is not at what? At the center. There is a way in which you can be able to move this particular element itself. Okay, 50% of itself up, then this thing will balance. Because looking at this now, this is meant to be the center. But this ball is not in the center because of what? The size of the ball. If it's like this is a straight line, it's just meant to be what? At the center perfectly. But this is a ball, it's a circle. And we are also focusing on what? Placing the center from this center, we want to move it to be what? To pop up a bit and be perfectly what? At the center of this what? Our parents. How can we be able to do that? There should be a way in which you can be able to transform this particular ball to move upward a little bit. And that is where transform property in CSS afterwards come into play. Okay, so this transform property in CSS helps us to be able to do what? To move an element also, okay, relative to what? To itself and not what? To the parents. You know, when we are making use of this absolute, we are moving in relation to the parents. Okay, we are moving around in relation to what? To the parents. But how can we be able to move around in relation to itself? So I can now take this particular ball. I want you to move 50%, okay, at the top based on your size, okay? So you can be able to move 50% up or 30% up or down or thereabout based on what? It's moving in relative to its own what? Its own self. Because based on what we have so far, this ball is moving in relation to the parent and not to itself. When we say top of 30 pieces, it's moving 30 pieces away from what? From the parents and not from itself. Okay, so you want to find a way in which you can tell this particular ball, move this particular amount of pieces or this particular amount of percentage in relative to your own self and not towards to your parents. Okay, and that is where we now talk about what? Transform property in CSS. Can you guys hear me? Okay, is there any question so far on what I've been teaching? All right, okay. Then let's talk about what the transform property was in our CSS. All right. Then and also go ahead and make use of transform. Okay. Now this transform, we have different way of transforming. You can see a lot of options here. but we're also focusing on what? On X and Y what axis. Okay. So I want to translate or move this my red particular background to a particular level. And before I do that, let's just take ourselves back to our basic what? Basic mathematics or normal when we are making use of graph in secondary school. Okay, so you draw a line this way. Okay, then you draw a line this way. Okay, if you are told to plot a graph, okay, it's always this way. Then here is going to be what? Our x-axis. So this is what? Our y-axis. Okay, and this is what? Our x-axis. All right. Then, based on what we know from secondary school, okay, in mathematics, you know that this is the positive side. So this is always the positive side. Okay, from here to here, it's moving towards what? The positive what side. Okay. Then from here to here, it's moving towards what? The negative side. All right. Then from here to here, okay. Now, this is different from our basic, a little bit different from our basic mathematics because can you remember in secondary school, down is meant to be negative, but for our CSS or mostly in JavaScript, it's going to be what? It's going to be positive. So when you are moving down, you are moving towards what? The positive side. Then if you are moving up, you are moving what? Towards the negative what? Negative what? Negative side. All right. So the reason why I try have to explain this is it's going to help us a lot in our transform what property. Now we have this. Then this is our ball. Okay. This is our ball here. Now, and this our ball. We want to start moving our ball based or relative to itself and no longer what from the parents. So we have to learn how are we moving up? Sorry, are we moving this ball up? Are we moving it down to the positive side? Are we moving it to the positive x-axis? Or are we moving it to negative what x-axis? So all those things are things we have to ask ourselves. Okay. So once we make use of that CSS property called transform, so we want to transform this what? This our circle. Are we transforming it to x or to y-axis at negative side? All right. That means we want to move it up. Or are we transforming it to the y-axis at the positive side? That means you're moving down. Or are we transforming it to the x-axis at the positive side? Okay. Or are we transforming it to the x-axis at the negative side? Which one are we going to do in this regard? Now, bearing in mind in what we have, I'm going to ask a question. Bearing in mind on what we have here. Okay. So this is our circle. Okay. So you can also use an imaginary eye to draw a line from here to here, which is what the vertical axis, then from here to here, which is what the horizontal axis. Okay. Are we supposed to move this circle? Because we want this thing to be at the center here. Are we supposed to move this circle up, or are we supposed to move it down? In related to what we have been learning here. So are we moving this our circle? Are we moving it up, or are we moving it down for us to achieve that particular center we are trying to achieve there? Okay, is there anyone I want to answer this? Can you guys hear me?
We are moving it up.
All right, that's good. That means you are moving it to y-axis, and it's going to be at the negative what side of it. All right. Then still looking at it that same way also, we are going to move it up, but now we don't really know how much we want to move. But based on my experience, and also if you take a look at this very well, if we can just move this up a little bit, like if I divide this circle into two, okay? If I divide it into two, okay? Then check from here to here. So if I can be able to just move this my circle, half of that my division, I'm going to achieve this circle being at the center. Okay, that means I want to move this circle 50%, okay, of its own what, its own height. And I will what achieve this at the center. And it's going to be what at the negative y what axis and not the positive what y axis. Okay, so that means I can also go back to my transform. Okay, I want to transform, then translate y. Okay, transform, translate this my circle in the y axis, and now it's going to be what negative what 50%. I can save this. Now by doing this, you can see I'm able to do what, to position this my circle perfectly, okay, at the center. First and foremost, I made use of all this my positioning to actually get it related to the parents, 50% of what the height of the parents, but it was not at the center at that particular time. Then I still moved ahead to now start making use of what this our transform what property, which I have to calm down and explain that since we're moving relative to ourselves, it must do what, it must understand this was our graph. Okay, this was our circle, and we are anytime we are transforming, we are going to translate this circle either in y-axis or in this whether it's in negative y-axis or positive y-axis or negative positive x-axis or negative what x-axis. Okay, or we can still move together like this. Okay, moving it this way, that means you are considering both x-axis and y at the same time. Or moving this way, so that means you are considering positive x-axis and what positive y-axis. Or this way also, that means negative x-axis and positive what y-axis. The same way this way also. So all these things are things that we are able to learn back then in secondary school, and now we are still using it here, because all these things still come down to what? To basic what? Basic mathematics. All right? And that is how we are able to do what? To place this particular circle at the center of what? Of our, perfectly at the center, okay? Of this, our direct what? Our direct parents. And so is there any question so far? All right, okay. So this is 9 o'clock already, or almost 9. Now, what I want you guys to do, okay? I want you guys to watch this video, watch it again, okay? Make sure you calm down, watch it, and try to practice this. Then your assignment now, which I want you guys to post in the WhatsApp group. I was able to achieve this one, this red one to be here. Now I want you to go ahead and achieve another one, which is going to be green one, should be at the right side. Okay, it should be what? At the right side here. Okay, so once you're able to achieve that also, you post it in what? In the group chat before our next class. Because in our next class, we'll now go ahead and start learning how we can be able to do what? We can be able to clone part of what? Of this LinkedIn. Okay? We should be able to learn how we can be able to do what? Design this particular section of our LinkedIn based on the knowledge you have actually was acquired now. By now, if you understand everything you have been learning so far, you cannot infer, you cannot start thinking oh, this particular circle, I know I'm going to do it. This particular circle now also, I know I'm going to do it. All right. Even this circle I'm seeing here, I know I'm going to do it because you're able to do what, to learn this positioning in this particular class. Okay. So is there any question before we call it a day? Okay, somebody have any question?
No, sir.
All right. Okay. Okay, if there is no other question, I think we can call it a day. Then see you guys in our next class. Okay, have a wonderful night rest.